You have done the work. You have read the books. You have sat in therapy. You have journaled at 2 a.m. You have said affirmations in the mirror. You have forgiven people you are not ready to forgive. You have meditated, breathed, surrendered, and all that. And yet, here you are again. The same pattern, a different face, a different city, a different situation, but the same emotional texture underneath. The same familiar ache. The reason healing does not stick is not that you are broken. It is not that you are doing it wrong. It is something far more structural than that. There is a layer of you that most healing modalities never reach. And until you understand that layer, what it is, how it is formed, and why it keeps running the show from below the surface, you will keep working on the symptoms while the root grows deeper. This is what I want to talk about today. Over more than 12 years, I have walked through various traditions, practices, different teachers and paths, some of them genuinely transformative, some of them that I had to unlearn entirely. And through all of it, the most important work was always the one happening inside, the direct inner work, the kind that does not happen in a book or in a weekend retreat. And recently I reached a point where the direction became very clear to come out publicly and to share my experiences, not just what has been learned, not as a belief, not as a theory, but as something lived. So my name is Jonathan, and this channel, Alchemy of Remembrance, is for people who are serious about going all the way in. Not the version of spirituality that makes you feel better for a week or for a month, but the real work. Okay, if I had to give you one principle that underlies everything I will talk about on this channel, it would be this: that reality mirrors you. Now, I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm not saying that everything that happens to you is your fault. I'm not saying you manifested your trauma or that you attracted abuse or that suffering is a personal failure. That interpretation is actually a distortion of the real principle, and it causes serious harm. So let me be precise, okay, about what this mirror actually means. There is a lawful correspondence, if I may call it, between your inner states and the patterns that keep appearing in your outer life. Not every event, not every accident, not every piece of random circumstance, but more the patterns, the ones that repeat. Those are almost always reflecting something that lives inside of you. The Sufi teachers say that the heart is like a mirror. So when it is covered in dust, reality cannot be reflected clearly. What you see outside is not pure reality. It is a reality filtered through the accumulated dust of your conditioning, your wounds, your unexamined beliefs. And this is not just a spiritual metaphor. In fact, contemporary psychology describes that it's the same mechanism through the language of projection and schema theory. So, okay, the patterns encoded earlier in life most often becomes the lens through which we perceive everything else. And we do not see the world as it is. We see it as we are. So, here is what makes this so difficult, right? So, most of what shapes that inner lens is invisible to us. It operates below the threshold of our conscious awareness, which is why you can be a highly intelligent, self-aware, committed person and still find yourself repeating the same story. So, what is that invisible layer, right? Where does it live, and why is it so resistant to the kind of healing most of us are doing? So, I want to introduce you to a concept that I have been working with constantly, and what I call as the deep mind, Deep mind is not simply the subconscious, though it of course includes that, but it is the full accumulated substrate of who you have become through experiences, both your personal experience and something older than you. It holds your trauma imprints, your nervous system adaptations, the emotional residue of your relationships, and the beliefs that were absorbed before you had the ability to question them. Think of it like as soil, right? The thoughts and your choices and behaviors you see on the surface, those are the plants. But the soil beneath them, its composition, its history, what has been poured into it, what has been buried in it, that is what actually determines what grows. So most conventional therapy works, they work at the plant level. It helps you to prune the unhealthy growth, work with the understand why certain patterns developed, and develop your better coping strategies. And that work has genuine value. I'm not dismissing it, but it rarely changes the soil underneath. Like for instance, somatic work, which gets much close, like because the body is one of the primary locations where deep mind imprints are stored. So, for instance, Peter Levine's work on trauma shows that traumatic experience is held not primarily as memory but as sensation, as incomplete biological responses that never got to be resolved. So, the work of healing in that framework is helping the body finish what it started. And yet, even that, as transformative as it can be, is only it only is part of the picture, because the deep mind is not just personal; it is also inherited, right? Epigenetics, the science of how genes express differently based on your environmental experience. So how that has now demonstrated that trauma can be transmitted across generations biologically. For example, Rachel Ehuda's research on Holocaust survivors showed that their children and grandchildren carried measurable psychological markers of stress, markers they were born with, not developed through their own experience. So, what your grandparents survived, what your parents never processed, what your lineage carried in silence, some of that is living in your nervous system right now, and those are operating as if it were your own. So, and in many indigenous and Eastern traditions, this was understood for centuries, and ancestral healing was not just mystical decoration, it was rather very structural. The recognition that individual suffering is rarely just purely individual. So when I say the deep mind is why your healing is not working, I mean this, like if you are only working with the story you consciously remember, the relationships, the childhood wounds you can name, you are still only touching the surface of the soil. The roots go deeper. Okay, here is another way to frame this, right? Most people think of the matrix, okay, the ones who use that word, as something that lies outside of them, like systems, institutions, media, culture, you name it. The story is the world tells about who you are, or what you deserve, and what is possible, right? And those things are real. I'm not dismissing them, but there is an inner matrix as well, and the outer one can only hold you as tightly as the inner one allows. So the inner matrix is the sum of all your conditions patterns, your habitual fears, your unconscious beliefs, your nervous system defaults, and your deep mind imprints. It is the invisible architecture through which you interpret every experience before your conscious mind even has a chance to respond. And here is the thing about architecture, like, you do not notice it until something forces you to, right? So you move through a building without consciously thinking about the walls. You're just moving, you're just walking between the walls, but you only become aware of them when you try to walk through one, right? The inner matrix works the same way. You do not notice it until you try to change something fundamental about your life and find that you cannot until you try to leave a pattern and it pulls you back, until you try to receive love and your body rejects it even though your mind wants it. So that resistance, that invisible pull back to what is familiar is the inner matrix doing its job. It was built in order to keep you safe. It was formed in conditions where certain adaptations were necessary for survival. But the tragedy is that it keeps running those adaptations long after the original conditions are gone. So the person who learned that love requires performance will keep performing even in their adult age, when in relationships where they are already loved unconditionally. So the person who learned that speaking their truth leads to abandonment will stay silent even when silence is destroying them. Take, for example, the person who learned that the world is a dangerous place will keep scanning for threat even when they are finally safe. So this is not a character flaw. This is architecture. And architecture can be changed, but not by repainting the walls. You have to go down to the foundations, right? So why does surface healing fail? Let me be direct about this. So affirmations fail when the deep mind contradicts them. So if you tell yourself every morning that you are worthy of abundance, but somewhere deep within your deep mind there is a seed that says that screams that love requires suffering, or that visibility is dangerous, or that success means losing people, the affirmation is fighting a war it cannot win. There is a contradiction. Basically, you are whispering into a hurricane. Similarly, gratitude practice fail when they are used to bypass rather than integrate. So, like spiritual bypassing, there is a difference between genuine gratitude that emerges from presence, and there is performed gratitude that is used to avoid the harder emotional territory underneath. So even therapy can fail at this level. Not because it is bad again, but because the therapeutic relationship itself can become another arena where old patterns just play out. The client who wants to please their therapist, for instance, the client who intellectualizes everything to stay out of their body, the client who makes progress in the room but then steps back into a re-traumatizing environment, and that immediately re-triggers every pattern they just worked on. So the problem is not the tools. The problem is that healing is being approached as if it were a linear process, as if you could simply remove a wound the way you remove a splinter. But the deep mind does not work linearly. It works in layers, in spirals, I would say in resonances, And it is an active relationship with your environment, which actually means you can do deep inner work and still find yourself pulled back if the conditions around you keep feeding that old frequency. So this is one of the things almost nobody talks about, that the field matters, right? Who you spend time with, that matters. The emotional weather of your daily environment, that matters. Because the deep mind is porous, it is absorbing what surrounds it. So genuine healing requires changing the soil, not just tending the plants. And it requires working at the level of the deep mind, and that is a different kind of work. So, what does it look like to actually work at that level? First, it requires honesty about what is actually running you. Not the story you tell the world or even the story you tell yourself, but the operating beliefs that are visible only in your patterns. Not what you say you believe, but what your behavior reveals you believe. So if you say you believe that you deserve love, but you keep choosing emotionally unavailable people, so what does your behavior say you believe? If you say you believe in your own worth, but you consistently undercharge, overdeliver, and apologize for taking up space, well, what does your pattern say you believe? So, the gap between what you consciously claim and what the deep mind actually holds, that gap is where the real work is. Secondly, it requires going to the origin of the pattern, not just describing it, but meeting the part of you that formed it. The inner child is not a metaphor, it is a living layer of your psyche, right? It's still carrying the emotional blueprint of what it was like to be you before your defenses fully formed. That layer is still in there, and it is still driving many of your choices. And thirdly, of course, and this is perhaps the most important and most overlooked, it requires what I would call integration rather than excavation. Most people approach shadow work as if the goal is to find everything that is broken inside them, okay? And they end up on a kind of archaeological dig through their wounds that never ends. But integration is different. Integration means bringing those disconnected parts of yourself back into a relationship with each other. It means that the shadow, the exiled, the shamed, the hidden, uh, they get to come home, not to be celebrated uncritically, but to be seen, to be understood and held. Because what is not integrated will be projected, and it will keep appearing outside of you until you claim it inside. And this is real alchemy. Not the removal of darkness, but the transformation of it. The turning of lead into gold is here not a metallurgical fantasy, It is a precise description of what happens when a wound becomes wisdom. This is alchemy. When a trauma becomes a doorway to liberation, when what once controlled you from the shadow becomes a source of extraordinary depth and clarity and creativity. So, my work is at that precise intersection. We are going to go deep into the deep mind. We are going to look at the mechanics of the inner matrix, the trauma loops, the inherited patterns, the egregores and the archetypes, the dark night of the soul, the black sun, the alchemy of speech, the astral field, basically the path of remembrance, not as an entertainment, not as a spiritual aesthetics. I'm serious here, but as a real living practice of reclaiming your sovereignty over your own inner world, right? So, because the outer world reorganizes around the inner one, and that principle has always been true. And if this type of alchemical shadow work resonates with you, and if you want to walk this path together, please do subscribe to my channel. And I'm Jonathan. This is Alchemy of Remembrance. The next video goes deeper into the alchemical process of the deep mind. So Stay tuned and I will see you there. Thank you very much and have a blessed day.